Hey, this is Coach Ed with some hints for homework page 60. So let's read this together. Find a possible exponential function in y equals a times b to the x form that represents each situation described below. First of all, remember, anytime we have an exponential function, it should look something like this. Y equals a times b to the x. Okay? And if you remember, the a is the initial value, and b here's your multiplier. Okay, x is the number of times you multiply. Oftentimes it's like the number of years. You know, it could be, it's often represented a number of years as an example, or time in an equation. Anyway, let's get to this. Okay, so I'm going to do one that has an initial value of 5 and goes through the point 4, 80. Okay, so how would I do that? First, I set up the equation y equals a times b to the x, and I know the initial value is 5, so I could say y equals 5 times b to the x, because remember, a is always the initial value, okay? It says it goes through point 4, 80. That means x is 4 and y is 80, right? Because this is always written as x comma y. So I'm going to plug it in. So I'm going to put 80 for y equals 5 times b to the fourth, because x is 4 right here. Okay. So how do I solve that? I divide both sides by 5. That leaves me with b to the fourth equals 80 divided by 5, which is 16. So how do I solve for b to the fourth equals 16? I want just b to the 1, or just b by itself. So remember that we could use the exponent rule, power to the power, right? So b to the fourth to the 1/4 power. And I'm going to do that to both sides of the equation. Now, why did I use 1/4 power? It's because when I use this multiplication rule, the 4 and the 1/4, we're going to multiply those through, and that's going to become b to the 1 equals 16 to the 1/4 power. So this is just b. B to the 1 is just b. 16 to the 1/4. If I plug that into a calculator, I end up with 2. Okay, what do I do when it asks me to find an equation that passes through 2 points? Well, here I'm going to have 2 different points that I'm going to evaluate, 0, 5 and 3, 135. First of all, I could say that y equals a times b to the x. Always start with that formula, right? The first point, 0, 5, gives you 5, because that's the y value, equals a times b. And what is my x value? It's 0 in this case. Okay, my second equation is 3, 135. That's my second point. My y value is 135, and that equals a times b to the 3. Oh, okay. Now, how do I solve this? Now I have 2 equations with 2 unknowns. Oh, that looks like a system of equations. It's not a linear system of equations, but it's still a system of equations. Okay. So the first step I'm going to do to the first equation is to solve for a. So a equals 5 times over b to the 0, because if I divide both sides by b to the 0, I get this, right? But this is actually just 5, because b to the anything to the 0 power is just 1. So this is 5 over 1, which equals to 5. So a is equal to 5. We know that. Anyway, let's go from the second equation. We're going to do the same thing and solve for b, or a, rather. So I'm going to divide both sides of this equation by b over 3, and I'm going to get a equals 135 over b to the third. Whoa, now I have 2 different equations. Here on the first one I have a equals 5. Second one I have a equals 135 over b squared. But since they're both a and they're both equal to these. In one case, it's equal to 5. In the other case, it's equal to 135 over b to the third. I could set them equal because a equals a, right? So 5 equals 135 over b to the third. Now I can multiply both sides by b to the third, right? And then these would cross out. And then I would have 5 times b to the third equals 135. I could divide both sides by 5. And I have b to the third equals 135 divided by 5, which equals 27. Okay. Now how do I get, that's b to the third. How do I solve for just b? Well, once again, b to the third to the sum power equals 27 to some power, right? So what if I took this to the 1/3 power? Then this would just cancel out and make it b, right? Equals, of course, if I did that to that side, I have to do it to this side, right? So what's 27 to the 1/3 power? Looking at my calculator, and it turns out to be 3. Because 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So b equals 3. So that's how you would solve it. And of course, in this equation, this would be y equals, a is 5. Figure that out all the way up here. So 5. So y equals 5. And b is 3 times 3 to the x. This would be the final answer. Okay?